Hello all, this is James Johnson, aka Sulfurblade, and I am here, I'm here with Red Dead Redemption 2. And I want to talk about Red Dead Redemption 2 and what do I want to talk about first? I want to talk about the fun, enjoyable game that it can be, or do I want to talk about the aggravating technical nightmare that it is? Let's talk with a review. First, start off with a review based off of the technical nightmare that Red Dead Redemption 2 Online is. And before I start reviewing it, I think maybe I will give some tips for those of you who may be trying to run Red Dead Redemption 2 on low-end PCs. So, I'm just going to put this straight out there. If you're running an i7 processor or less, so 7th generation or less, you are going to be slamming your head against a wall trying to get this game to run. And as far as i7 processors go, unless you're running a 7700, which is pretty much the king of the i7s, you're pretty much going to be banging your head against a wall trying to get this game to run. And that's mainly because it's very poorly optimized. So I'm just going to start off with the video card recommendations. i7 7700 or better. i8, or not i8, but 8th generation processors, 9th generation processors should be okay for the most part, as long as you get a benchmark of around 10,000 or more. If you're familiar with what I mean, if you go to Passmark or Benchmark or any of these benchmarking sites, they can show you kind of a statistical breakdown of CPUs and also video cards at the same time. And if your CPU's not kicking out around 10,000, you're going to have a hard time with Red Dead Redemption 2. At about 8,000 is what I would call the bare minimum. Underneath 8,000, and you're just going to have technical nightmares. It's going to be a complete headache. You're going to want to slam your head against the wall every 5 minutes because the game is going to crash every 5 minutes. Now, what can you do to try to alleviate crashes? Well, there's several things that you can do. If you're crashing a lot on good processors, like 8th generation, 9th generation processors with lots of cores, then you can run a program called Process Lasso. I strongly recommend running Process Lasso, but when you run Process Lasso, be sure to run it in high performance mode for the game. Turn off the Pro Balance mode. So that's step 1 of Process Lasso. Step 2 of Process Lasso, turn on the UI, or not the UI, but the I/O settings, basically input-output for the game's priority to be high. You want the input-output, the packets coming for the game into your computer, to be prioritized as very important. So turn I/O for Red Dead Redemption 2 up to high. That's step 2. Step 3 is find the CPU limiter. And with the CPU limiter, this recommendation is for people with newer processors. 8th generation, 9th generation, especially the Xeons that have lots and lots of cores. And you're going to want to put in a parameter that says that basically says when a CPU reaches 97%, then basically shut down that core for 1 nanosecond. So yeah, you put in the 97%, you put in to shut down one core and replace it with another core for 1 nanosecond. Why do you do that? Because if any one of your multiple cores spikes, it gets up to 100%, it will lock up. Depending on how long that lockup lasts, it will be translated on the screen as either a stutter, or it could be translated on the online version of Red Dead Redemption 2 in the wonderful "you've been disconnected from the server" error page. So yeah, process lasso for you guys with really nice 8th generation, 9th generation processors with lots of cores. Put that CPU limiter on to shut off the core that could possibly spike for a period of 1 nanosecond and have it replaced by another core. Excellent use of that will help. You will be amazed at what that will do for your performance in Red Dead Redemption 2. Now, those of you that might not be running up to snuff processors, like you're around 8,000 benchmark, you're really not strong enough for Red Dead Redemption 2, but you want to run it anyway, and you're like a budget PC gamer who refuses to upgrade. You're gonna make your budget PC work no matter what you do. You're going to lean the machine. The only thing that's going to be running is going to be Red Dead Redemption 2, and you're going to make it work, or at least you're going to try, and you're going to pound your head against the wall trying to do so. Well, other than Process Lasso, you're going to want to run a program known as Battle Encoder Shirazi. And what this does is it's basically a CPU throttler. It's a piece of software that is designed to throttle your CPU. And what you're going to do is you're going to set your CPU to be throttled at 97%. So basically, anytime your CPU, again, gets up to working near the 100% capacity, you are going to purposely throttle your CPU so that it doesn't. And what that will translate to is it will oftentimes translate into some stuttering or a slowdown of what you're seeing in the game. But the game won't crash. It will just stutter and slow down for a little while until the game catches back up. That is far more preferable than disconnecting every 10 to 15 minutes, trust me. Now, that little piece of a Band-Aid is only going to work if you're running like completely lean. You've got Steam turned off, you've got TeamSpeak turned off, you've got Discord turned off, you've got all these background programs you can think of turned off. And that's if you're up around the point in the CPU capacity. I don't know the exact place it is. I'm thinking it's around 8,000 benchmark type CPUs, where you're going to be able to get away with using Battle Encoder Shirazi as a fix, and it will actually feel like a fix. But when you get down to 7,000, 6,000, so you guys that are going to be trying to run this on like a G47, 4620 Pentium, dual core, the weaker i5s, the kind of weaker i3s, yeah, you're not going to do it. You can still run Battle Encoder Shirazi, but even with it throttling, it's still going to lock up because the game is just going to lock you up. It's poorly optimized. It shouldn't be, even on the lowest graphics. But what you can do is you can go into custom graphics. So there's graphics beyond what you see on the screen. The problem with the custom graphics is they really truly look horrible, and in order to change them, you have to actually go into an INI file and change something from being at its limit of a +1 to a -1. Like for grass, for instance, you can turn that to -1 and it completely turns off the grass. And completely turning off the grass will get you a little more performance, but it really won't give you enough added performance. There are some other things you can do, but then the game is just going to look like complete and total crap. So even with all the settings set to low through the basic settings that you can change without going to the INI file, the game still looks pretty good. But once you start adjusting those INI files to -1s, the game, yeah, it no longer looks good. And even in that case, some of you are just not going to be able to play it, not reliably. So my recommendations to you, people that are willing to go through that much effort to try to get this game to run, well, your best effort is to probably just fork out the $250. Maybe you can get a deal during Black Friday coming up or something, where you can get maybe an i7 7700, which you're probably not going to be able to find them because I think the 7th generation processors at this point have been discontinued from most retailers, though you could probably still pick them up on eBay, or a few retailers might still carry them, but I think most retailers have switched to the 8th and 9th generation processors, and if that's the case, then you need a new board. But that might be something to look at, because a new board plus a new processor in, say, 8th or 9th generation may be the equivalent of the same amount of money you might have worked out to get the 7700, the i7 7700, and you may get actually a little bit more in performance. I can't guarantee that, but that should be something that you should definitely look into doing if you are seriously considering upgrading in order to get this game to work. So now that I've given some technical tips and tricks to try to get Red Dead Redemption to work, is it worth the headache? No. This is Red Dead Redemption's PC release, and to be frank, it's terrible. It's utter trash. It's not even funny. So when people that are running 2080s on brand new PCs that have spent serious buku dollars on their machines can't get Red Dead Redemption to run right, for the most part, most of those people have actually, at this point, probably have gotten Red Dead Redemption to run right. Red Dead Redemption has released some fixes, though for most of us those fixes just broke the game worse. But for the people with the upper end rigs, I think they helped things for them anyway. So if you're in the top 10% of gamers equipment wise, you'll probably be having a good time with Red Dead Redemption on PC. In fact, you'll be having a great time because the game looks amazing if you have a $4,000 or $5,000 machine. to be able to run it. But if you're not amongst those lucky few, and to be honest, when I'm talking lucky few, I'm talking for 60 FPS, you're looking at a minimum of probably like a 2060. No, I don't mean a 1080. I mean a 2060. A 2060 is a newer, higher-end card, basically, than the 1080 at this point. The 1070 is the card that I would call minimum recommended from my standard. The 1070 should get you reliable 30 FPS. That's right, folks. You're not getting reliable 60 FPS with a 1070. You're getting reliable 30 FPS with a 1070. With the 1080, you might be able to get up between the 30 and 60 FPS, if you're trying to play on Ultra, that is. If you're willing to dial it back, you can narrow in on some 60 FPS with clever settings. But if you want Ultra with 60 FPS, 2060 minimum probably is the video card you're looking at. And for 30 FPS play, you're looking at a minimum of a 1070. If you're running a 1060 or the 1050 Ti, now you're beginning to start to slam your head against a wall and get very frustrated with the game, because those cards are right around the same bottleneck ratio, if you will, as the 7th generation processors are. So if you've got a 7th generation processor that's not the i7700 with, say, a 1050 Ti, and you run most games great, you're not running Red Dead Redemption 2. You might think you might. You might think you can get it to run on low. You're not going to get it to run. You might get it to, and I'm talking the online mode. So the story mode, you can get a solid 30 FPS playable story mode on all those settings. But as soon as you turn on the online portion of it, you're just going to be disconnected, 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 and at some point you're just going to scream and want to throw something at your computer. So those are my recommendations for specs to play Red Dead Redemption 2. Yes, that is some pretty hefty specs I'm recommending to play this game. It's too high. If a 1050 Ti and a 7th generation processor that's not a 7700 can't run this game, then Rockstar failed. And Rockstar has failed. Rockstar has failed to optimize this game, and the PC gamers are suffering because of it. If you are the majority of budget PC gamers who are rocking something like a 7th generation i5 with something like a 1060 or a 1050 Ti, well, newsflash for you, don't even bother picking up Red Dead Redemption 2 at this point. Ignore it. Maybe when it releases on Steam, maybe by that time they may have optimized it a little more, but at this point, it's not playable. So that's the good, the bad, and the ugly from a tech perspective of Red Dead Redemption Online. From a fun standpoint, the game's really enjoyable. I haven't released a video in almost 2 weeks because Red Dead Redemption 2 has pretty much completely sucked me in. And I haven't looked back. So whoa, what's going on here? Oh, Right. So if you're watching my background, you're going to notice that crazy things are happening. And this is actually a my first attempt at this video, except I discovered that when I was filming this video that I didn't check my sound settings in OBS, and my mic wasn't working. So this whole video that I filmed just failed. Right now you're seeing me opening up Battle in Coder Shirazi to show people how to use the Battle Encoder Shirazi for the purposes of throttling your game. Here, I'm basically showing that you select Red Dead Redemption 2 there, you hit Limit Watch, you click Yes, you change it to 3%, negative 3%, which is the same as 97%, or whatever you find works best for you, but for me, that's the best setting for me to use. And yeah, this is how easy it is to use this piece of software. And yes, it's a must if you're going to be attempting to run this game with lower end hardware. So again, when I mean lower end hardware, I mean an i7 processor that's in the neighborhood of between like the 7 and 9,000 benchmark. So it's not as good as a 7700, but on the upper end of the 7th generations. If you use this and you throttle your PC, or you throttle your processor, there's a chance that some of those upper end 7th generation processors can actually work using the Battle Encoder Shirazi, as I already stated. But anyway, yeah, this video is getting quite long, and as you can see, I already did one video on this, and the reason that the sound didn't work in the first video is because I had, in all the things I've done to try to troubleshoot this game and get it to work for me, one of the things I did was I changed out the sound drivers on my motherboard. I updated the sound drivers on my motherboard, and when doing so, I failed to think that would affect OBS and my settings in OBS, and it did. So I did this whole long video one time already, explaining all the things I've explained in this video to try to help you guys out. Actually, there's something funny about that background that we've been watching. At the time that I was filming this was Red Dead Redemption 2 online playing in the background at the time of filming. And as you've noticed, the game is never loaded in. And that can happen. Sometimes when you go to log into Red Dead Redemption 2 online, you get stuck in a permanent loading situation, like I was stuck in here. And I figured, actually, that was a decent place to be stuck in, because I didn't think my computer could run OBS and record the game simultaneously. And when you're stuck in this infinite loading loop, it's actually less resource intensive. It only uses around, I don't know, 3/5 of the resources it would normally use if the game was online and functioning. And so I figured, yeah, since this is a game about all of the technical glitches and problems with Red Dead Redemption 2, that it seemed fitting just to let the game play in the infinite loading background that it was stuck in at the time. To get out of the infinite loading background is easy. You just go to the Control Delete Task Manager, shut down the process, and then restart the game. What are some other tips I can tell you? Oh, where you play in the world of Red Dead Redemption 2 Online does matter if you're running on budget hardware. If you're running on budget hardware, you're going to want to avoid the bayou, the swamp, and any places that are near the large towns in the south. If you stay out in like the heartlands, which is kind of a deserty area outside of Valentine, or if you stay in like Big Valley up in the northern part of West Elizabeth, or any place where there's not a huge amount of trees, a lot of wide open space, and very little buildings, the game plays remarkably well. But once you get to places that are scene intensive, and by scene intensive I'm talking like the crazy sun rays and the stupid fog and all this extra stuff that they've put into the game for the purposes of graphics, which is very prevalent in the bayou. The bayou is going to be really hard on low-end machines. If you can avoid the bayou, do so, because you'll have more disconnects in the bayou than just about anywhere else in the game. There's also another hotspot I've noticed, and that is there's these giant waterfalls up north of Valentine. And there's one particular location near those giant waterfalls. The giant waterfalls themselves usually aren't a problem, but there's also these cool hot spring geysers. But if you get to a location that's kind of in between the giant waterfalls and the hot spring geysers, you can kind of like physically position yourself perfectly between the two places. Then your computer is trying to do the waterfalls and the hot springs at the same time, and if you're on a budget PC, you're almost guaranteed to crash in that area because it's just too much for a budget PC to handle. So if you want to see the cool hot springs, I would recommend coming at it from an angle that is as far away from the waterfall as possible. And if you're wanting to see the waterfall, come at the waterfall from an angle that's as far away from the hot springs as possible. I know that does sound kind of ridiculous, but these are actual tips that do actually work to help you stay connected. Also, the speed in which you travel does help a lot. So if you're going to go into a big town, or any town that has to render buildings and things of that nature, and if there's a large number of players around at the same time, you're going to want to jog, canter, walk into that scene. Let that scene load. Don't just run into a town, hell's bells, as fast as you can. You'll quickly notice nothing renders, and then you got one of those dreaded crashes. So there are things you can do to help mitigate the crashes. I've given as many recommendations as I can at this point, from running third-party programs to actual gameplay. And these recommendations, the gamers I'm targeting here, if if you're going to be trying to play this game under the i7700 benchmark and the 1070 benchmark, if you're in the 1060 and 1050 Ti bracket with a 7,000 to 8,000 benchmark processor, which is still a pretty decent gaming rig. It's what I call a budget PC, a budget gaming rig, right? You're the people I'm talking about. You are the people all of these tips and tricks I'm talking about are designed for. Because you're the ones that are going to be as frustrated as I've been. And if you listen to these things I've said in this video, you might be able to actually play the game for a period of 45 minutes to an hour and a half without disconnecting. But you will disconnect. You're just going to have to get used to the fact that you're going to disconnect fairly regularly, and by fairly regularly, I'm talking sometimes every 5 minutes, sometimes you can go for an hour and a half, maybe even 2 hours, but it all depends on your gameplay. It also maybe depends a little bit on the server, how many people are on that particular server you connect to. But you can get some good gameplay in if you're that dedicated and that willing to bang your head against the wall in order to do so. But I would strongly recommend, if you haven't purchased the game, you're on the fence about it, and you don't have an i7700 or better 8th generation, 9th generation processor with at least a 1070 or better video card, don't even bother trying to pick up Red Dead Redemption 2 PC at this point. It's just futility. It really is. Anyway, I am James Johnson. I haven't done a video in quite a while. That's because obviously I've been playing Red Dead Redemption 2, and there's no way I could possibly run OBS and play the game at the same time. Just no physical way at all. The only way I've been able to play is with nothing, and I mean literally nothing, running in the background, and that's been quite frustrating. But at least I've gotten to play it, and from the time I have played it, I have enjoyed myself. It has been a very enjoyable experience, if not filled with a lot of frustration. Anyway, this is my video. Hopefully you appreciate it. Hopefully I've helped somebody out there that might see this. If so, please leave a like and subscribe. And until the next time, all, peace.